Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to present 13 insane Let's Not Meet stories for your viewing consumption. Before we get into it, understand that not all the stories here are really age appropriate. Some involve some torturing the animals, so if that will disturb you, the only way you can avoid that is by clicking off the video now. As per usual, none of the stories here are written by me, but rather by the prospective authors on the Reddit page of Let's Not Meet, and will be properly credited and linked in the description below. With that being said, sit back, relax, turn down the lights, and welcome to my dungeon. I'm your host, That Creepy Reading, and today, I'm signing off. The Uber Driver? Who wasn't an Uber driver? By my own guitar hero. Sharing this experience from literally last night because A, it's creepy as hell, at least for me, and B, I want people to learn from my experience. This is a precautionary tale. I understand this was my fault, but maybe if I can help one person by telling my story, it'll be worth it. I don't drink as a general rule, but once a month or so, I'll go with friends and binge. My friends and I have a great night at the bar, and they left. I was chatting it up with a cute person, and I decided to stay. I went back to his place, post-coitus, very unsatisfying for anyone who's interested, and I'm ready to head home, so I call an Uber to pick me up. I, at this point, don't really know where I am. I know the city I am in, but not my exact location. I ordered an Uber, but it's taking forever. Requesting. So I cancel it and try again. Pretty soon a car pulls up, and I drunkenly mumble something like, "Is this an Uber?" And I hop in. Mistake. Ubers are supposed to have some kind of marking on the vehicle. The guy pulls away and starts driving. We're chatting, I'm fumbling for a cigarette, and next thing I notice is that we're headed on the highway, but in the opposite direction where I thought we needed to drive. And on top of that, we're going a solid 90 miles per hour. Then I got a call from my Uber driver. He's there, I'm not. What's going on? And the reason why I wasn't there is because it turns out I'm in a car with a fucking nutcase. I started texting my friends frantically, counting off the mile markers for them. Then I realized that that's not going to do anything, because the person I am texting is also drunk. So immediately I start to call 911, but I realize this guy is crazy. He's refusing to slow down the car, refusing to let me get out, so I have to do this very sly. It's been 40 minutes now and I'm terrified. I don't know where I am, I don't know who this is, and we're driving literally over 100 miles per hour at this point. Weaving in and out of traffic, this guy is going to get me to hang up my phone call. And then, he says to me, "Yo, hang up the fucking phone. Right now, you fucking calling someone? Fucking better not be a snitch." And also started to smoke some pot. I don't know if that actually was pot, but it seemed to be coming out of that kind of device, so one can only assume. So at this point, I don't really want to start anything that might provoke a violent reaction from him. But I start chatting with the 911 dispatcher as if it was my friend, praying that they will catch on. I say, "Hey girl, it's me, and I'm with someone right now. We're driving past insert highway exit here." "No, sweetie, it's not my Uber." "I thought it was, but it's not. It's a shame you can't come and meet me and bring friends." And thank sweet baby Jesus that the operator actually catches on. He gets me to stay on the phone, and he sends cops. And we develop code. If I see cops, I'm supposed to casually put my hand on the window, which looks semi-normal because I'm smoking a cigarette. We pull into some random little housing complex, and he busts out some powder and forms 2 lines. I now have confirmation that not only is he doing this weed-like substance, but other strange drugs I wouldn't even imagine touching with a 10-foot pole. Which means that he's also now emotionally volatile. I relate to this operator in code. Oh, girl, wish you were here right now. The guy just busted out the coke, and you love trying some. He's taking a really big bump. A man after my own heart. Pretty soon I can see the lights from the cops, so I start waving my hand out the window. At this point, I don't care if he's on to me or not. I don't know if he has a weapon, but I slump down in my seat just in case things start getting hot. The cops surround us, get him out of the car, and then, once it's safe, they extradite me. They whisk me to the hospital for a drug test and evaluation, and that's where my story ends. On my way to the hospital, I'm explaining all this to the officer. I find out that this guy's 40-ish years on this earth has been, well, out of the 40 years he's been here, he's literally spent most of that time in a federal prison. Well, 30 of those years in a federal prison for violent offenses. I want people to learn from my mistakes because, if nothing else, call 911 and stay on the line. So, crazy, strange dude I met in a weird situation. Supposed Uber guy. Let's not meet again.
Toilet Voodoo by Zoom Punchy. I've been considering posting on Let's Not Meet for a while after hearing YouTube narrators share different posts. Thought that I'd finally give it a go since this story of mine seems to be a fave when I tell it. Though it's probably more comedic in the end, it was terrifying while it was all happening. Bear with me, it's kind of a long one. When I turned 16, I was required to get a job. Most of my high school life was playing WoW, and my mom had had enough of me lazing around the house. She worked as a manager at Sears Roebuck, where I was guaranteed a job no matter what, but of course I didn't really want to work there. Clothing retail? Gross. However, in the end, nowhere else in the mall was hiring and I didn't have my own car. Sears it was. Now, since Sears was in the mall, the employees saw their fair share of creepy events and odd people. On my first Black Friday there, someone was stabbed in the parking lot. The elevators would open and close for no reason, and the people that worked upstairs swore they could hear a child laughing in the fitting rooms when the store was closed. Anyways, to the actual story. Like I said, my mom was a manager at the time. I didn't work in her department, but when she opened, I was forced to come in with her to replace sales signs on the floor while she prepared for the store opening. This was usually around 7 a.m. The only other people in the store at this time were janitors. Now, our janitors weren't fluent in English. They were a family from Cuba the store hired to clean up every morning. In the family was a sweet older lady that I'll call Lola. Lola could only really speak a couple of sentences in English, but while I was there in the early morning, she'd teach me some Spanish. Mostly small words and phrases. It was a fun time killer. She'd also give out small candles from her apron while cleaning. Her job was to clean the restrooms from the night before, which, trust me, was always disgusting. The restrooms in that Sears are a horror story on their own. However, there was one morning where the restroom reached a whole new level of creepiness. I went to work with my mom at 7 a.m., replacing signs in the home fashions department on the second floor while Lola cleaned the restroom downstairs. It's a normal morning so far. I'm yawning and bitching to myself that it sucks having to be there so early. And then I hear a scream. Not just any scream, a piercing, loud scream that leaves me jumping so hard I nearly scream in return. Rushing downstairs, I pass the restrooms where Lola had been cleaning. My mom, who had been running to see what the fuss was about, sees Lola's face and my confused and worried expression, and then walks into the bathroom. My first thought was, shit, there was a dead fetus in the toilet. Or someone wrote something satanic in the bathroom stalls. My mom finally comes out of the stalls, face pale. "We're calling the cops," she whispers to me before rushing to a phone. By now, I'm extremely uneasy. Did someone get murdered? I peek into the restroom where I hear a very quiet, very eerie whispering. What I see next has me chilled to the bone. Sitting on the toilet with the stall door wide open was a lady. The lady looked disheveled. Hair a frizzy mess, skin sickeningly white. Face was empty. She's staring right through me and her lips are moving. She's murmuring? No, chanting. Finally, I step out of the restroom, and by this time, my mom is back and the cops are on their way. Lola is still reasonably freaked out, crouched down near a shelf, praying in her native language. The cops finally arrive and escort the chanting lady out of the restrooms, and my mom and I talk to one of the officers. And you know what the most disturbing part of all of this was? The Sears store had a security system, a pretty good one. Sensors throughout that store, once the store was closed, would immediately go off and the cops would be notified instantly. But the alarms never went off that night, and upon close inspection was revealed to be still fully functioning. But the security system never sensed anyone in the store and the cops were never alerted. The chanting lady had been sitting on the toilet murmuring in the darkness, not moving a single inch, for 9 hours straight. We never figured out why or even how. My mom asked our security officers about a tape to the camera once they came in. After reviewing it, discovered that the camera that showed the entrance of the bathroom had been broken. Lola quit a couple days after, and I never saw her again. I'm 22 now and I live in a different city, work at a different job, but I rarely use the restrooms in public anymore. Always still kind of scared I'll hear that chanting. So, creepy chanting lady in the restrooms of Sears? Let's never meet again. And Lola, I hope you're doing well.
Woke up to 2 people inside my house while home alone. Ended up looking down the barrel of a gun held by an old childhood friend. By Quarazon. Quick backstory here, I'm 18 and I live in a lower middle class townhome complex with my divorced mom and my little brother. My mom was out of state for a week at the time and my little brother was staying at our dad's house for the week. I don't drive, so there were no cars outside my house. 18-year-old with a house to himself for a week, with a mom who was perfectly fine with me smoking weed in the house and gave me permission to have a few friends over while she was gone. Every teen's dream growing up, right? Yeah, except it ended up a little different than I thought. The first day, I come home from a 10-hour shift at the gas station I work at half a mile down the road from my house. I walk home, head into my basement, smoke a bowl, and fall asleep with my cat. A few hours later, I wake up with an uneasy feeling. It's 1 a.m., and I hear footsteps upstairs. My cat's on my bed, and my dog is at a dog daycare for the week. I hear drawers upstairs being opened, and immediately grab my switchblade and call 911. They send a squad car out, and I stay on the phone. I hear someone coming downstairs. With my bed just being in the basement due to the bedroom essentially being the size of a closet, I'm the first thing they'll see when they come downstairs. I jump to my feet, drop to my phone, and drew my switchblade. The door opens, the light turns on, and in walks a man around my age, wearing a backpack and holding a crowbar, 5'10", 140 pounds. Scrawny and shirtless me is standing there with a mere 4-inch knife, locking eyes with a man I've never seen before inside my house while holding a crowbar. He jumped just as high as I did when he saw me. With a surge of foolish confidence, I point the knife towards him and told him not to step towards me. Funny, considering his crowbar had a solid foot of reach over my knife. He shouted,
"What the fuck? Bro, we didn't think anyone was here. I'm not looking for a fight, man."
I hear quick and heavy footsteps coming down and a voice saying, "Yo, what the fuck are you doing down there?" A second man emerges through the doorway, this one holding a pistol, and it's pointed at me once he notices me. His eyes light up, as do mine as I realize who I'm looking at. An old elementary school friend that I drifted out of contact with. I had some friends who started talking to him recently, but I heard that he turned into a recreational Xanax addict and didn't want to fuck with that, so I never bothered getting back in contact. Turns out that that's exactly why they were robbing my seemingly empty house, for Xanax money.
"Josh?"
he said, in a questioning voice as he lowered the gun.
"Fuck, dude, I don't know what to say."
At this point, the door slammed open and the police rushed into the house, eventually coming downstairs and arresting the two. It didn't even dawn on me until the cop that stayed downstairs to talk to me jokingly mentioned that I had a bong on a desk next to my bed. Roughly an ounce of weed in the desk, and the basement had to have smelled pretty strongly. Luckily, the cop ended up being cool with it and just saying, "I honestly don't care. They need to legalize it anyways. After what you've been through, you need a joint." But I never said that to you. So yeah, I'm not a storyteller by any means, but I thought that you guys would enjoy.
Internet girl was probably a creepy internet dude, and I tried to meet up with her. By Moonlight Wolf. This all took place during a weekend, and I was browsing some online dating sites. I'd never dated anyone before, but being this late in my life, I was really excited and curious to find actually someone who was interesting to meet. Keep in mind that I most certainly was not looking for hookups. I messaged a couple of people who sounded nice, and as I'm about to log off, this person messages me. They don't have much info on their page and just have one picture, but I decide to humor this person and have a bit of conversation. We hadn't talked for long before this person says that we should meet up. She didn't live too far from me, and it wasn't undoable at this point. However, the moment she said we should meet up, red bells started going off in my head. I've always been a very careful person and never one to take risks. However, I've recently been worrying that I've been being too careful, and that I might be missing out on some of my life because I wasn't seizing the moment at all and just jumping into things feet first. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I needed to loosen up a bit and get out of my comfort zone. Anyways, I end up agreeing to meet this person, and the place she arranges to meet was around a 20-minute drive. Another red bell goes off in my head when she tells you to wear a dress or a skirt or something like that, and I certainly was not going to do that, therefore I just wore some shorts. Before I head out, I tell my friends where I'm going. That probably was the one smart thing I did that night. I told her the location I was heading, and that if I hadn't texted her again in around 2 hours, that she should take action. I jokingly said that if I hadn't contacted her within that time frame, that I probably would have been kidnapped and sold off as a sex slave of sort. She wanted to know what I was up to, but I simply refused to tell her. So I tell my mom that I'm going out to the store, and I head out to meet this person. The place she told me to meet looked kinda sketchy, but I kept going, and I remind myself that I'm too nervous. I arrive at the park that she specified, and to my relief, there was one other person there, a lady with her child. I keep my close eye on this lady and find great comfort in her presence. I wait at the park for a while. I'd arrived at the specified place at the specified time, but where was this girl? I left around a half an hour later. The lady was probably really confused to why I was there and why I arrived alone and why I stood by a fence for half an hour. I made the drive back and go on my computer to find out what had happened. The person explains to me that they had arrived, but have been spooked because a car full of creepy guys drove by. She asks me to return to the place. I say no, and she starts to beg me and try, and I kid you not, dirty talk. I wasn't really into it because, as I said, I wasn't really into this one-night stand business. The person then states that she had seen me and that I look cute in my pink shorts. This I actually kind of found creepy because whoever this was actually spying on me from afar. And at this point, I want to shut the whole conversation off and log off. It didn't occur to me until quite a bit later that the person probably never arrived at the park because that lady was with her child. And that the online profile was probably fake because it actually kind of seemed like, just based on the way the dude was typing, that it was a male. Or at the very least, some creepy dude. The dude had probably been waiting in his car for a lady and her child to leave before he made his move. Whether that be mugging me or trying to do something else is up to your own imagination to come up with. I don't really want to know at this point. I'm actually pretty happy that I deserted the area and neighborhood so that... I don't know. The place is pretty deserted, so there's a good chance that if that lady wasn't there, no one would have been able to hear me scream for help. So now that I'm older and wiser and I think back to this day, I send a silent thanks to that random lady who probably saved me from something terrible. Nowadays, I listen to my gut, and I don't worry about being too timid or careful. So, creepy internet dude who I found on the internet, who could have became a wild fling from a while's past, let's not fucking meet again.
Stepmonster by Natty G30. I often read Reddit when I'm bored at work. I love reading all these Let's Not Meet stories and figure it's time I post my own. So, my mom left the picture when I was 3. She literally picked up one day and just walked out. So for a long time, it was just my dad and I. I'm a male, and at the time my dad met Tammy. I was 13 years old. I was chubby and at the time small for my age. I still had my baby fat. I was and am still a nerd. So was my dad, and we shared a love of Star Wars, comic books, and science fiction. My dad decided he needed to meet someone. He was lonely, and I thought it would be nice to have a mother figure. This was before online dating and there was still personals in the paper. My dad filled out an ad, and it wasn't long before he met Tammy. I remember him telling me about her and how happy he looked. They dated for a month before my dad figured it was getting serious and he wanted to introduce me to her. So, my dad decided to take us out for dinner, then a movie. I remember my grandma helping me to get dressed, and I was super nervous to meet her. She seemed nice at first, but even at that age, I could sense something was off. We went to Sizzler's for dinner, and my dad told me to order whatever I liked. He then excused himself to the bathroom. I smiled at Tammy, went to say something, and she cuts me off, telling me my dad's been letting me eat whatever I wanted, and that I'm a fat little piggy. She demonstrated this by actually fucking making pig noises. I was crushed. I mean, honestly, I wasn't very heavy, maybe a little chubby but not obese like some children are today. My dad didn't actually let me eat whatever I wanted, but anyway, back to the story. She ignored me until my dad came back and then played nice. I, for my dad's sake, faked being nice to her too. I wanted to tell my dad what she said, but I didn't want to disappoint him or upset him. My dad was and is my best friend. Anyway, so I hoped and prayed my dad would realize what a bitch she was and come to his senses, but sadly, he didn't. They dated steadily, and when I was 15, Tammy moved in. Now, that summer, I finally lost my baby fat and grew like a good foot or two. My dad's 6'3", so it wasn't surprising that I shot up to almost 6 feet by age 15. Puberty kicked in too, and my voice was doing that weird cracking thing. I made it a point to avoid Tammy. I went to school, came home, and stayed in my room, did homework, and waited for my dad to get home. However, she started in on me most days as soon as I walked in, and she always found something. I was a loser, I was stupid, etc. Just cruel, mean things. The few times I told my dad, he just insisted we all needed to adjust. So I just decided I could put up with her for 3 more years, for my dad's sake. Then, I was out of there. The next 3 years sucked. Her insults got meaner. She also would do things like put glass, pieces of paper, and sand in my food, and just my plate. I started refusing to eat her food. I was terrified she'd poison me. It was around this time my dad and her got married. Graduation came. I was so relieved I was set to enlist in the army. I planned on being in basic by July, but of course, she had to try to ruin that. My recruiter got a call from someone saying I smoked pot and did drugs. Thankfully, I passed my drug test, but I know it was her. One night before I left for boot camp, my dad had a huge party for me. She had tried to cancel it earlier, claiming she was sick, but by that point, my dad had already invited most of my family and friends and wasn't going to cancel. She pouted the entire time. I started to see that my dad was kind of starting to see past her facade. Let's skip a few more years, and I get leave. I've been deployed twice now, and I hadn't seen my dad in 22 months, so I was dying to see him. He had told me in previous conversations that their marriage was pretty much over. She not only was controlling and verbally abusive, but a few weeks prior she had knocked my dad out with a cast iron skillet. He had given her an ultimatum of a month to get out, or he was throwing her crap out. The night I got in was late. My dad picked me up, and we came home. She was gone, supposedly. She had started moving her crap into her sister's, and was pretty much staying most nights there. So, Dad and I ate, and we go to bed. Around 1, I feel my bed move. I'm exhausted and figure it's my dad's dog Caesar, a German Shepherd. That's when I feel hands go around my neck, and my soldier instincts kicked in. I flip the intruder over and subdue them. My dad runs in and flips the light on. He's got his gun out. Surprise, surprise, it's my stepmother. Dad calls the police, files a restraining order, and serves her with divorce papers. A lot more shit happens, such as her destroying my dad's new Mercedes, but I won't bore you with the details. What matters is they're divorced, and I never have to see that bitch again. So, Tammy, let's not meet again.
Catfished and Stalked by My Ex's Girlfriend by Marissa Let's Not Meet. I have to apologize in advance. I'm not the most amazing storyteller. I'm going to try and write everything down as I remember it happening though. My brother is an avid Redditor, and he told me that I should post my story to the sub, so here we go. I used to date a guy named Norman back in high school. I'm 29 now, and have a 9-year-old daughter, so this must have been 12 to 13 years ago, roughly. I guess we were each other's first real love relationship, and we even wore promise rings, which was a pretty big deal back then. We talked about getting married, what our life together would be like, basically things people say or do when they've been together for a year as teenagers. As things go, we began to argue and fell into a cycle of breakup and getting back together. I was immature and stupid, and I ended up getting together with another guy during one of our break periods. It was a messy love triangle situation, and Norman and I finished for good after I chose the other guy. Not my proudest moment, but I was 17 and stupid. Fast forward a few years. I made a Facebook account, and out of curiosity one day, I looked up Norman. We added each other on Facebook, and I messaged him, apologizing for what had happened between us. I was happily married by that time, and we had just had my daughter. Norman was a good sport about it, and we remained amicable friends via social media. I really only ever talked to him to say happy birthday or randomly comment on a status. Another few years go by, and Norman gets into a relationship with a woman named Marissa. I was happy to see him moving on. My marriage didn't work out, but I was happy with my life and with raising my daughter all by myself. During Christmas one year, I found an old Polaroid picture of me and Norman at a cabin weekend we had taken together when we were dating. I messaged him telling about it and recalled how much fun we had had. He didn't reply, and this was before those scene stamps, and later I found that I was no longer on his friends list. A few months later, I got a message from Marissa. She basically said that I was a whore and a slut and that she saw the message I had sent him months ago. She told me to never, ever contact him again and that I needed to get over him. She went on to say how the charm bracelet he had given me was nothing compared to what he buys her, and that I was just a cheap fuck he had had in high school. She said the silver promise rings were bullshit and that he had bought her a gorgeous gold engagement ring with several diamonds. Well then, I never responded. I got off Facebook not long afterwards for a short period of time, before remaking an entirely new profile and adding only close friends and family. Over the next few years, I would get ads from people I didn't know to all my social media. I knew it was her because the first account I mistakenly added began to send me abusive messages saying I was a loose slut and an attention-hungry whore who would never find true love. Afterwards, I never added anyone else I didn't know personally. I don't know how she kept finding my other accounts. She tried to add me on Instagram, Twitter. She even somehow found out my phone number and tried to add me on WhatsApp. When Snapchat became a thing, I got an ad from a user who had one of my Facebook friends' name as their username and sent me snaps of whore and bitch in cursive handwriting on paper. I kept blocking her and maintaining no contact because honestly, there was nothing else I felt I could do. This year I joined a dating app. I met a guy within the first week of being on it who I thought was amazing. His name was Nate, and he had a fair few pics of himself. He was average looking, so it didn't raise any flags with me that this suspiciously model looking guy was trying to talk to me. He said he had an Android phone so he couldn't FaceTime, but we could talk on the phone. It was definitely a man's voice. We texted a lot over the next few weeks and things seemed to be going well enough to lead to a meetup. We scheduled a time and place. A week before, he asked me about past relationships. I didn't think too much of it when he asked me about my first real relationship. He seemed keen on details and asked me if I still had feelings for my ex. I reassured him I didn't, but that I also didn't hate him because I was the one who messed it up and he was actually a really good guy. We talked a lot about that relationship, and then he said he was looking forward to meeting me. We had chosen to meet at an outdoor cafe, because I didn't like the idea of meeting someone at my house without me actually knowing who he was. I was so excited. It was my first date in a long time. So, imagine my confusion when I saw a woman spot me and smile and start walking over. I was too fucking shocked to say anything when she sat down and yes, it was Marissa. She looked so smug and she said, "Hey babe," and kept smiling. She confessed it was her. At this point, I honestly just wanted to know why. What did I ever do to this chick to get all these random reactions from her and for her to actually invest time in doing all of this to me? Basically, this is what she told me. Almost 6 years ago now, when she and Norman got together, he told her all about me and our first relationship. She went on his friends list and saw me there and went through all my pictures and posts, trying to see what he saw in you. Then when I messaged him, she confronted him over why I had any pictures of me and him still and why he needed to have me on Facebook. He deleted me and promised her not to talk to me again. She told me she hated me and said that I was a stupid bitch who loves playing with people's emotions and that she wanted to give me a taste of it. She said she made accounts so she could keep an eye on me and to make sure I wasn't going to be in the same city as her and Norman. I live right outside their city, by the way. She would walk by places I'd say I'd be at if I was to make sure he wasn't meeting up with her in secret. She knew where I worked through my LinkedIn. She said the guy who I spoke to on the phone as Nate was her friend who was in on it and wanted to see me go down. She said she had originally planned to make me fall in love with Nate and then cheat on me, but she couldn't stand to wait so long. The most disturbing part, however, was when it came to my daughter. This woman had actually become extremely fixated on my daughter. She was convinced that she shared some of Norman's features and became obsessed, thinking that I had a kid with him who I kept secret from him. She told me to not even think about suddenly revealing it to him as some ploy to get back together with him, and that she would be the only one to give him a baby. I was beyond horrified. It's not very exciting, but all I remember doing was getting up from the table and telling her to never contact me again. I got in my car and just sat there in silence for a bit. The first thing I did was call my daughter's school and alert the front desk of a possible situation where someone who was neither I nor her father would try to pick her up. I called my brother afterwards and told him what happened. He urged me to call the police. I did, but I ended up getting the whole spiel about if I didn't have any documented proof it's her or her saying any of these things, they couldn't help me out. It's been 2 months. I haven't heard anything from her, and my brother thinks that maybe she got what she wanted by asserting herself as Norman's one and only, and now she would leave me alone. Still, I have massive paranoia when it comes to what I post on social media and where she might be lurking next. I've told my family and close friends about the situation and warned them not to add any strange profiles or people they don't know. I told my neighbors the situation and showed them a picture of her so they could call the police if they saw anyone like her around the house. I wouldn't put it past her to know my address and start peeping in our windows. Or worse. I also changed the locks as a precaution. So hopefully this is the first and last time I post on here. Marissa, let's not meet. Not meet.
Man on the Couch by Freak of the Night 450. For a bit of backstory, my mom was dating an abusive prick at this time. We'll call him Ian. Because of Ian and the crazy fights they had gotten into, we couldn't lock up my house at all. He had kicked both the front and back doors to my house, and they never bothered to fix it. My mother and Ian were at a bar all day. Every day. I told you this so you would know why the house wasn't locked up, and my parents weren't here when it happened. This incident occurred when I was around 12 years old. My brother was around 10. I was really small at this age, and my brother was sick all the time, and he too was very tiny and frail. My mother and Ian were at the bar as usual. When you open my front door, it puts you in my living room, and you could see the back door. There was a hallway to the right that led back into the bedrooms, and that's where me and my brother were. We were in his bedroom, with the door closed, playing something on PlayStation. It was around midnight or 1 a.m. and we're playing this game and having a good time when I heard a weird noise. My brother didn't hear it, and I didn't want to creep him out. I told him that I wanted to go get a drink, told him to stay in the room, and I would bring him something when I got back. To get to my kitchen, you would have to walk down the hallway in front of both the front and back door because it was behind the living room. I kept hearing strange noises before I left my brother's room. I told him to get into the closet and work on our fort so that would be ready when I'm done getting our drinks and a snack. I raised my little brother for the most part and took care of him, so he listened. I had a terrible feeling and a sense of dread. I could tell something wasn't right. This was a way to get my brother to hide without scaring him. He frightened easily and had a really bad asthma attacks. But unfortunately, we had no inhaler, so if I scared him too bad, there was a good chance I could possibly get him killed. I knew that if he started having a asthma attack on top of being scared, what happened wouldn't be pretty. Anyway, I left the back room and decided to see what was going on, because I was such a badass 12-year-old, but I had to protect my little brother. I start sneaking up the hallway as slowly and as quietly as I could. I was terrified. I could feel that something was wrong. Before I made it to the end of the hallway, I hear a man It sounded like he was growling. It was a deep, terrifying noise. I can't explain it, but the feeling that washed over me was damn near well enough to make me puke. So I, of course, froze. I have no one in this town. I don't know anyone. And my dad is living in a different state. My mom is at a bar, probably drunk as hell. And I was sitting there trying to gather the courage to see what was around that corner. And going over my options when I hear my brother's door open and he sees me and the look on my face, he also freezes. I remember his eyes going wide with fear because he must have heard the growl or whatever it was too. I motion him with my hands to go back into my room or go back into the room, and he does. I gathered the courage to peek around the corner, and that what I saw still freaks me out to this day. It was fucking horrifying. I saw a man, probably around 6'6" and 300 plus pounds, sitting on my couch with the most weirdest fucking grin on his face. That grin and the look in his eyes will forever be burned in my head. By some stupid luck, the man didn't see me. I slowly, oh so very slowly, snuck back into my brother's room. I slowly shut the door. And then I started going over my options again. My little brother was already horrified because of the growling man and the weird noises he was making. I'm so thankful that he wasn't the one who saw who was out there. I mustered my brave older sibling face and calmly told him that there was a man that I didn't know on the couch, and that he needed to be very quiet, and that I needed him to be brave and keep his breathing in check. My little brother adored me and looked up to me, and when I told him that I needed him to be brave, he tried his best. I told him not to move, and so he did not move. The first thing I tried was the window, but it wouldn't budge. It was completely stuck. I'm making myself stay calm for my brother's sake. I know what's sitting out there. So, since the window was stuck, I decided to start looking for a weapon. My older brother still lived here, and I knew they had swords somewhere. I don't remember where he was, but as I'm looking for a weapon, I hear the man sing, "I know you're here." And fuck. That is when my stomach started to knot up and the hair on the back of my neck raised, and I instantly got into a cold sweat. And then I hear it. My little brother started wheezing. Asthma attack. At this point in time, I hugged him and I reminded him about being brave and told him to sit still and focus on breathing. I started frantically trying to get my window open, but as I said before, it was stuck. I looked around and started moving blankets. That's when I find my older brother's cell phone that he always forgot. I remember thinking that I was lucky and felt a bit of relief. I immediately called the police and told them what was going on. Hysterical at this point, but still remaining quiet. The dispatcher told me to remain on the phone so that they could hear what was happening. That's when the man started banging on our bedroom door. It had been about 5 minutes into the phone call when this happened, and I could no longer remain calm. I fucking lost it. I started screaming. I mean, blood-curdling screaming. The kind of screaming that would send chills down your spine if you heard it. I forgot to mention that our bedroom was the only one with a working lock. So the door was locked, and he was trying his damnedest to get in by banging on the door. His banging got louder and louder. He was screaming to let him in, and then it went completely silent. Then he did the creepiest, most terrifying thing ever. Start fucking laughing. You know, I could just bust down this door, right? In about 2 seconds, right? Tap, tap, tap. Now he's lightly knocking on the door, asking for me to open it. His demeanor had completely changed. I then heard scraping against the door. What I imagined in my 12-year-old head was that he was scraping the door with his really long fingernails or something. but I'm sure that wasn't the case. That's when I start hearing the police screaming at him to get down on the ground and put his hands up, and you know the rest. I heard him putting up a fight, followed by more yelling and eventually silence. After a few minutes, there was a knock on my door, but at this point, I was too terrified to open it. I thought it was going to be the nightmare guy, and somehow he overpowered the police like some Orwellian monster. So being in my hysterical state, I started screaming, sobbing, shaking. I couldn't stay brave for my little brother anymore. I was on the floor holding him this whole time, convinced that we were going to die that night. Eventually I calmed myself a little bit, and this time a female officer was at the door, so I opened it. There's about 5 cops standing in the hallway listening to me in this hysterical state. I refused to let go of my brother at this point, and we both ran to this female officer and just collapsed and started sobbing hysterically. We had been so scared. Turns out that this guy was completely wasted and high on drugs. I remember the cops walking me up to him and having me stand in front of him to ask me if I knew this man. Of course I didn't, but I'll never forget standing in front of that huge man, looking into his brown eyes that were completely bloodshot and filled with nothing but hatred. I never forgot that growling noise he was making, or that look of pure horror in my little brother's eyes. My parents were called and investigated for leaving us alone like that, and for the doors being like that as well. My mom is a very much different person who doesn't drink and is now married to a cop. She's completely changed. I remember asking her about it later, and she told me that I didn't know. The man had a huge knife, so that scraping noise that was at the door was actually his knife, and apparently he also brought some rope, tape, and a tarp. I still don't know what he didn't get to us, or why he was unable to just break down a door, or a great many of what ifs. It would have taken literally one half-ass kick for him to knock that door down. It was super thin. But I will let you know that it still creeps me out, and I have nightmares from it. My husband doesn't really understand why I get so furious with him when he leaves the door unlocked at night. I work third shift, so when I come home, the door should be locked. Sorry for this shitty way of presenting the story, but I have one last thing to say. Creepy drug-crazed man, and is a product of my nightmares. Let's never fucking meet again. The following story contains abuse to animals. If you are the type of person that gets disturbed by written or spoken verbiage involving animal torture of some kind, I highly recommend you click off the video now, as that's the only way you are going to avoid any disturbing content. However, for the rest of you who have decided to stay, sit back, relax, turn down the lights, and I salute you with this next Let's Not Meet story.
Followed Home by a Knife-Wielding Freak by Facynth. Back in June of this year, I went from first to second shift to the convenience store I'm currently working at. Unfortunately, the manager of the store did little to nothing to address the tardiness of our third shift guy, so I'm stuck quite regularly working an extra 30 minutes to an hour each evening as I eagerly await the arrival of my favorite coworker. I'm supposed to begin counting down my drawer at 10 o'clock each night, but lately I've been doing it at 10:30 and even as late as 11. One night, he's running late again. I'm about to write no call, no show on the schedule when Mr. Tardy finally comes in at 10:20. I'm excitedly counting down my drawer as my fellow second shift coworker does his after looking at me with a disgusted face, equally as annoyed as I am that we had to work an extra 20 minutes. But at this point, we should be used to it? Maybe. After counting my drawer and writing down the information, I input the amounts onto the register and it prints out my daily transaction history. For the first time ever, I've pitched a perfect game, not being a single penny above or below where I should have been that evening. Not that that's anything to brag about, but hey, it's good for the confidence that I'm doing my job well. So anyway, I go back to the manager's office and punch out, officially ending my evening of work. On my way out, I say goodbye to my coworkers and begin my trek home. I live in a rural area in the suburb of a small city not too far from where I work. Usually my boyfriend comes to pick me up due to my lack of a driver's license, but tonight he's working overtime. It's not the first time, and I live in a very safe area, so there's pretty much nothing to be afraid of. Also, the night air was warm and there was a slight breeze, which was too amazing to pass up. I take comfort in the safety of our area, so I don't have any real fear of walking home. To get there, I first have to walk down the highway about a mile, then turn onto a couple of streets that eventually lead to my apartment, passing our community center, a church, and a housing development along the way. I'm about halfway down the highway to the first street I turn on when a truck drives by rather close to me and honks his horn. Disgusted, I curse at him, even though he can't hear me now that he's up the highway. I was clearly not in the lane and off to the side of the road, but whatever. He got me good if his intention was to startle me, so fair play, I suppose. Turning onto the first street, I can see the community center in all of its lit up glory in the near distance. I always have a feeling of comfort when I'm in its presence. I know a lot of people who work there, and others who are regularly at the library and cafe, so passing by it is always a somewhat euphoric feeling. Once past it, it's a rather dark walk up the street towards the church due to the lack of any streetlights. On my right, I pass the entrance to the housing development where my boyfriend's parents live, along with almost everyone I know who works at the community center. I first hesitated and thought maybe I could stop by my boyfriend's parents' home, but since it was late they'd probably be asleep, so I continued up the street towards the church. It's 11 o'clock now. I found this out by the church bells. I stopped in front of the church and listened to the 11 rings as I looked up into the sky at the stars. I picked the perfect night to walk home, I thought. I hadn't felt this great walking home from work before. However, my feeling of euphoria was interrupted by the sound of a stick snapping to the right inside the churchyard. My heart leaped as I quickly began walking again. Looking behind me a few seconds later, I saw what appeared to be either a young man or a teenage boy emerge from the churchyard and turn in my direction. I recognized him as a guy that I've seen before at night when my boyfriend and I are out or driving home from work. Nothing too unusual, I used to think. That is, until I turned around to see that he was slightly closer and he was holding a freaking knife in his hand. My heart leaped and I froze in fear as he continued walking in my direction. Once I got a more clear look at him, I could see that the knife was rather large, like a butcher's knife, and covered in what I thought was blood. I didn't want to think it was blood, but that's what I thought it was. I almost screamed as I ran as fast as I could up the street towards my apartment, occasionally looking behind me to see that he was still walking in my direction at a rather languid pace and was looking up at me, but I couldn't make out any facial expressions. I finally reached my apartment and struggled to unlock the door with my trembling hand, but eventually was able to burst it open and shut it behind me and lock it. I ran into my kitchen and got my cell phone out to call my boyfriend. He didn't pick up. I frantically went to the window and looked outside to see if I could see the guy that followed me. To my horror, I saw him, standing still on the sidewalk down the street in front of my apartment. Moments later, my phone rang. It was my boyfriend. He asked me why I called, and I told him what had happened. He told me to call the police, which I did. I sat down on a chair in my kitchen as I explained what happened to the 911 dispatcher. Occasionally, I would get up to look out the window. He was still standing there the first time, but when I looked again a couple minutes later, he was gone. It took about 20 minutes for the police to show up at my apartment, along with my boyfriend who got there a few minutes afterwards. I explained to them about a guy I saw with a knife and how he was following me. After giving them my description of him, they told me he sounds rather familiar to an individual they have stopped and talked to several times at night in the past. They told me they will have somebody drive around the area to see if they could find him and assured me that I was safe. My boyfriend prepared some food and drink while I sat there and talked with the officers about unrelated things like work and also about the previous times I've seen the guy out and about. After a few minutes, one of the officers is talking on his radio and tells us that one of the officers investigating the churchyard found a dead cat and a decapitated rabbit underneath a tree inside the cemetery of the churchyard. I almost cried, thinking about how the guy that followed me must have been responsible for killing 2 innocent animals. My boyfriend comforted me as the officers assured us they would be out and about and that I was safe. Once they left, my boyfriend and I agreed that from now on I'd have a ride home from work, and to work on getting my license and a car. It's been several months since that night, and I've since obtained my license and a car, and I haven't seen the guy in quite some time. I hope it stays that way.
Once upon a time, I was used as leverage for cocaine debt by backing away slowly now. Back in late 2006, I was fresh out of high school and starting college life, country girl in the big city and all on my own. I met people quickly, made a few friends, and got a job to support myself that took up most of my time. In no time at all, I was besieged by the plague of the mooch friend, the person who really needs you to cover the bills this month because insert new reason that makes you the jerk for not helping here. I was brand new to living on my own and thought they really needed my help, so I tightened my belt and worked harder and longer. Pretty soon though, that was running into me paying for everything and barely having food. It was about this time one of the people I had recently met started asking me to go on a blind date with a friend of theirs named Connor. I said no a few times, but when they said it would just be dinner and a movie, and that Connor would pay, it really piqued my interest. I had been living off ramen noodles for weeks, and an actual meal and something to do other than work sounded really appealing. She swore up one side and down the other that Connor was so nice and so shy and so sweet, and didn't have to be more than just one date. I asked her why such a great sounding guy was getting set up on a blind date. At this, she faltered and said that he really seemed to have retreated into his shell since starting college, became hard to talk to, and had been all around odd lately. They thought a nice night out with someone would bring him back out of his shell and help him to adjust to the enormous life change that is college. I reluctantly agreed, and she immediately set up a time that very night as it was my first day off in a while, and we didn't know when I would be free again. Connor responded that he would pick me up outside a local ice cream shop in his red car. This was important since I didn't have a cell phone, so that was how I would know it was him. I went to the ice cream shop, and after being 20 minutes late and starting to feel like I should just walk home, the car pulled up way too close, and Connor stepped out. He was about 5'6" with a bowl cut, blonde hair, big round glasses, and a polo shirt. He ran around to my side and opened the door, placing a hand on the small of my back and telling me to get in quick or we would be late. My first red flag had popped up, but I just figured he was a jerk and was happy that I would only be around this guy for a few hours. We started driving, and he immediately started asking me questions and wanting to know all about me, and I was happy to oblige, as he was not really adding to the conversation, and it felt awkward when no one was talking. I didn't say anything personal, mostly funny stories and anecdotes. I knew better than to give out all kinds of information to someone I just met. After a while, I realized I had no idea where we were. Not in a way you feel when you are new to a city and the streets become unfamiliar, but in a way that I was not sure anymore when the last time I saw streetlights and road signs was. I realized then that he was keeping me talking as long as possible so I wouldn't notice where he was driving me. I was alone in a car with a guy I didn't know, driving who knows where with no phone and a bunch of roommates who probably wouldn't notice me missing until the bills were due. I felt like such an idiot, but I knew I had to berate myself after this was over and needed to get my head in the game now. I decided to play along like I was still oblivious and asked what movie we were seeing and what kind of food after, and how he knew my friend who set this date up. Just lots of things to keep him talking and distracted while I looked around for a road sign and gently felt for the unlock button on the door. Suddenly, a sign popped up in the distance for a gas station, and I figured I could tuck and roll out of the door and run inside for help if I could just find the button to unlock the door. Just then, the car stopped, and Connor threw it into park and jumped out just as someone else jumped into the back driver's side seat. He shut the door and turned to the man in the back seat, which was great for me because I could now look for the button and unlock the door without him noticing. I found the button, quietly pushed it, and pulled the handle, hoping to do this as quietly as possible and maybe gain some ground to the gas station before they noticed me. I pulled, no response. I pushed on the door while pulling, no response. I checked the button again and tried again. No movement from the door. It was at this point I realized I wasn't getting out of this car unless it was from the driver's side. All the while this is going on, Connor is having a loud conversation with the guy who jumped in the back, who was apparently his drug dealer. Yeah, suddenly all that stuff about him acting weird since college made a very loud click, and from what I gathered as I was trying to open the door, Connor had developed quite the habit. Apparently, he owed his dealer money for cocaine and was using me as leverage to hold on to while he went and got the money. What the fuck? Luckily, this was full of, "I swear I'm good for it," and "I'll be back in a few minutes," repeated several times and were loud enough to mask my fumbling with the door. Connor ran off into the darkness of the woods we parked next to, and it was just me and the dealer in the car. I stared straight ahead, so there would be no problems about me having seen his face later, should it come up. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, and then he says, and I will never forget this,
"Hey honey, wanna go back behind the gas station and blow me for some coke?"
I was not sure what to say to this, so I went with my first response, which was a high-pitched and musical, "No thank you." To my unending luck and this man's credit, he proceeded to bust a gut laughing, which made me laugh too. He then said, "Damn girl, you got like self-respect and shit." To which I once again didn't know how to respond, so I just shrugged and said, "I try, sir," which made him belt out a long, loud laugh again, and we both ended up chuckling for a few minutes. He then asked,
"What the hell is a chick like you doing with this guy?"
I didn't know how to respond, and so far things have been doing alright, so I just told him everything I told you. He even asked if I tried to jump out of the car when it stopped, as that would have been the sensible thing, and I told him I tried, but my door didn't seem to open from the inside, because at this point, what have I got to lose by lying? He then said something I really didn't think I would hear. He said he was sorry. Apparently, ever since college had started a few months ago, he had been going to the same one as Connor, and was dealing on the side to make ends meet until he got his degree and didn't need to anymore. Connor was from a rich family and was one of his best clients at first, but spiraled into debt with him quickly and was hitting this stuff way too hard and fast. Connor was supposed to meet him here to give him the money he was owed, but when he got into the back seat, this guy jumped out of the front, made a million excuses about how the money was coming in just a few minutes, and had ran off into the woods with me still in the car. At this point, I had no idea what was going to happen next, and was about to ask how long we had been waiting when a hushed argument and stomping sounds became evident from the woods in the direction Connor had ran off to. Out pops a much taller guy dragging Connor along to the car window and begins breathlessly apologizing for the actions of Connor. He said Connor was an idiot and this was all a big mistake, and handed the dealer something. I imagine money, as he said it was all there and a little extra, and that Connor would not be bothering him again. The tall guy opened the door for the dealer, who got out less than happy with these guys, but content with his money. At this point, a big dude introduces himself as the guy's roommate, Kyle. When Connor had come back to the apartment, it had popped a red flag as he was way too cheerful for someone who had left a few hours prior, shaking at the thought of paying off his dealer. After a little questioning, Connor said he had decided to pick up a girl and leave her in the car with the dealer to pay off his debts. Kyle was rather irate at this and wanted to know how exactly that was going to pay off anything and what exactly was wrong with him. Connor said you saw drug dealers take chicks all the time on TV, so this must be a valid form of payment. Kyle then began to beat up Connor and demanded to be taken back to wherever he had dropped off the car right now, but not before making a stop at the ATM for the dealer's money. Connor protested, but Kyle smacked him around a bit until he saw the light, and after making a quick ATM stop, marched him through the woods back to the car to pay the dealer and got me home. He told me this while repeatedly hitting Connor in the back of the head as he drove me back to the city, exclaiming things like,
"Whatever made you think kidnapping some girl was a good idea?"
And, "Did you think you would just magically never see your drug dealer again? You have a class with him on Monday, dude." He then made Connor apologize as well, and we sat in silence for a while, as I wondered how I ever in a million years got lucky enough to get kidnapped by a complete idiot who had the nicest drug dealer on the planet and a roommate that doubled as an aggressive Jiminy Cricket. They dropped me off as soon as we hit downtown, as I didn't want them to know where I lived. I thanked Kyle profusely as I got out, and he said it would be all good if I promised to never go to the cops about it since they had futures and whatnot. I said no problem, and they drove off. And I walked home to eat my ramen and never, under any circumstances, let myself end up like that again. All in all, a great ending, as long as I never meet any of them, ever again.
He Crawled Up the Stairs by Madam Fizzgig. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't been able to even begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old, 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town I previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends who lived several hours away. Before I continue, I'll give you a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house. One on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, which did have a lock and floor-length curtains for privacy, and another door on the side of the wall from my bedroom which led into the garage and basement. When you walk into my bedroom, you can see all the way across the house, kitchen, living room, dining area, to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer, when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer, and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiflingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window and pulling the curtain down, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake that feeling of dread. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I could recognize it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped and everything returned to silence, so I figured that I was probably right and it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived, as soon after the scratching stopped, from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds, wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek around the corner, and if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if it was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed something was off. I squinted as hard as I could. I looked over at the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of my stairs. He was fucking crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out of the window. As I was unlocking my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet, sing-song voice, he cooed, "I know you're in there." This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I had hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy and ringing their bell over and over. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course, they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house. So, to the psycho who broke into my house knowing that I was home, let's not meet again.
She thought we were making fun of her, by Miss Blister. This happened back when our family moved to our new house in 2001. I was 8 years old and my sister was 10. Since we had just moved, my mom really wanted some new furniture to make our new home look nice. We weren't well off in the first place, but it was our first real home, meaning it wasn't a cruddy mobile home for once. We drove to a little value furniture shop that had a bunch of things to choose from. Of course, my sister and I, being typical siblings, were joking around with each other. She called me an ugly freak, and I told her that her face was fat. Just normal things. Unfortunately, my mom couldn't find anything that she liked, so we left empty-handed. We got into the car. She wanted to go to the grocery store and pick up a few things, so the trip wasn't a total waste. We drive along. My sister and I notice a brown car following us, turning every corner, making every light. We pointed it out to my mom, and she just blew it off. Don't worry about it, guys. So we dropped it too. We were young and we completely forgot about it when we went to the general store and grabbed our snacks. Again, we got in the car and left for home, and again, the brown car started following us. Mom was getting a bit worried since we lived in another town 20 miles away. She told us it had to be someone we knew. We had relatives living in the town, just not anyone we were really close to. Like they did before, they copied our route. The closer we were to home, the more paranoid my mother became, and in turn, fueled our fear. She told us to copy the license plate but tried to reassure us that it was probably our cousin Jessica or something. When we parked in our driveway, the car parked behind us, the engine still running. Our mom ordered us to stay in the car while she went out to talk to our cousin. My sister and I watched from the rear view window as my mom went to speak with her. After a few minutes, we heard the woman from the car yelling, gesturing to us inside the car, and then back to my mother. She peeled out of the driveway, almost running over my mom's feet. A few seconds later, my mom was crying hysterically and ordered us to get into the house. She pushed us into our room and spoke to our dad even though we could hear everything. Apparently, the woman had thought we were insulting her while we were in the furniture store and threatened us. She had said that she would throw nails in our driveway and poison our dogs outside. She insisted that my mother beat us for talking to a complete stranger in such a way, and if she had the chance, she'd break our little necks if she heard us talking about her again. My dad wasn't very happy that my mom brought her all the way to the house, but stated it probably wasn't a big deal. The next day, my sister and I were walking to our bus stop when we saw the brown car parked across the street from our house. Sis immediately ran back inside to tell our dad, and he walked us to the bus stop and waited until we were safely on the bus. My mom wanted to do something about it, but my dad was against it. He assumed that the police wouldn't do anything since they were just threats, so the creepy, stalkerish behavior continued without interference. She began showing up every morning, watching us as we waited for the bus, but she was coming onto our property to make her presence known. My mom found a bottle of antifreeze near the dog's fenced area. It hadn't been opened, but we were told to bring in their bowls every night, just in case. Food wrappers and half-empty cups of soda were thrown in our lawn. The air valve caps and lug nuts on our tires went missing. One of our outside cats died, but we couldn't pinpoint what happened. Then my older brother did something really stupid. My dad was tired of walking us to the bus stop, so he asked my older brother to do it. Spotting the car in its typical spot, he decided the smart thing to do was throw up his middle finger at her. This fucked her up. She ran out of the car, cursing and yelling at us. She said we were crazy and needed to fucking learn our place as children. She was screaming and threatening to beat us and spitting at us. I was bawling my eyes out, and my brother had to pick me up because I just couldn't move. We stayed home that day, and my mom finally called the police. We gave them her license plate number, and they said they would visit her in a day or two. My mom didn't tell me much, but when they confronted her about it, she went on a total rant about how kids are just dirty bastards and she'd kill every last one if she could. They didn't arrest her, but a few days later, the police called my mom to inform us that the lady was admitted to a psych ward. There were no more details, unless my mom didn't want to share them, but we never heard from her again.
Someone was living in my apartment while I was at work. By astonished. So I just got my new job back in October, working tech support on graveyard shift. I work from 1 a.m. to 12 p.m., Friday through Mondays. Needless to say, I had to adjust my sleep schedule, and that has been quite the task, but I managed. On the days that I don't work, I still follow up with my work schedule, waking up at midnight and staying up till about at least 2 p.m. before falling back asleep, as to keep my sleep schedule within line with my work schedule. I brought blackout curtains, so it was easier to do this, and as trying to sleep with the sun up was kind of hard for me. I usually require complete darkness in order to sleep. I live alone. I started noticing weird things happening around my apartment when I would get home from work, or after waking up on my days off. Just things that were very minuscule at first. Lights being on that I swear I turned off. Doors being left opened or closed. Just so everyone could get a bit of understanding, I live on the second floor and my building is right behind the leasing office. The entrance to my apartment requires you to enter the building first, go up a hallway, and then a flight of stairs, and then you get to my door. Each apartment has 2 deadbolts, one that you can unlock for the outside, another that requires you to unlock it for the inside. There was also this balcony that faces the east, which was completed with a large group of sliding glass door and screen. I use it quite frequently as I had potted plants out there, but have brought them inside due to the cold weather. My apartment is one of the closest to the camera. I intentionally left out the number for obvious reasons. I also have 2 cats, Luna and Eclipse, who until recently lived with me. I am moving soon and can't afford the pet deposit, so my parents offered to let them stay at their house for a time being. Eclipse is Luna's daughter and only 6 months old, so she follows her mom around all the time. I usually find them cuddled up together on my chair or bed, and recently they trapped themselves in the bathroom. Now that they're not here, it had gotten harder to pass off these weird occurrences as my cats. Doors are still being left open and closed, and food has been disappearing from my fridge. At first, I passed it off as me being my usual self and just not remembering I ate something when I was half asleep or bored. Recently, my boss gave me permission to work from home as a shift is brand new, as the company is moving to 24/7 support, and the building owner refuses to heat my floor for my shift for only 2 people. So I've been doing that for the past couple of weeks, and last week I noticed the metal rod that acts as a secondary lock to my balcony door wasn't engaged, so I put it back. I didn't think much of it at the time, as my computer faces the balcony door. I like to watch the sunrise, and I like to watch people watch the sunrise, so you can sue me for being a creeper too. I would like to also admit that I sometimes fidget with it with my feet while playing video games. On the 11th of December, my credit card information was stolen and my account was charged over $3,000. I was in the office that day as a favor to my coworker who recently was being creeped out by being in the office alone in the middle of the night. The charge was made at 11:40 a.m., just a few moments before I got off of work, and I had the card on me, with me still. This is relevant, I promise. I was restless and didn't sleep well. I woke up at midnight as per usual on Monday morning and got my setup ready to take calls. Now, almost no calls come in on the weekend, so I'm usually screwing around on Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, and Netflix. Around 3:30 a.m., I was checking up on the 100 when someone unlocked my fucking door. I don't mean pick the lock. I mean, they used the key and unlocked the fucking door. Thank God the second deadbolt was engaged, but the person jiggled the door and tried to get it open. I ran, grabbed my gun, and looked at the people, but saw nothing. I opened the door with the intent to shoot someone that day, but the person was already gone. Before you ask, yes, I called the cops. No, they didn't find anything. There are no cameras in the hallways of the building, or outside for that matter, and they told me that there wasn't enough evidence for them to really even do anything about it. And left. You gotta love the good old 5-0. I didn't sleep at all the next night and decided to stay home on my days off. I was desperate to try to catch that person. If they try to come back, that is. I also asked the licensing office if they had handed out any extra keys to my apartment, which they politely said no. And then informed them that I should probably have changed my locks to the door. You remember the pictures from before? Showing my apartment door? Well, the white door, just on the other side of the fire extinguisher, is my storage closet. It opened with the same key for the deadbolt. I kept my Christmas tree decorations in there just in case if I decided to set it up. As I'm pulling out the tree this evening, it's only a 5-foot tall fake tree that has all of its lights attached to it already. I noticed a bag back behind it. A small black duffel bag. In it, I found a change of clothes, sunglasses, shoes, and toiletries, as well as a notebook. What was in the notebook actually legitimately horrified me. There were notes about me, what hours/days I worked, notes about my cats, and updated notes that they were no longer there and the date in which they left. My fucking credit card number was in these notes. As I went further and further back into the notes, I found 2 words circled multiple times. Balcony door, which I assumed was how the person entered my apartment for the first time. This creep had been living in my apartment while I had been at work for the past month, and I didn't even know it. The worst part is that I was in my apartment at the same time this guy at some point, and didn't even fucking know it. That's the only way he would have been able to got my credit card, and my house key to make a copy of it somewhere. I've called the police, and they were on their way over. I'm actually writing this as I'm waiting for them to show up. It's the only thing keeping me sane right now, plus I think it'll help me organize my thoughts so I can best explain to officers what the fuck just happened. I'll keep you guys updated on the progress. A quick update though. Apparently I used to have a roommate, and he actually left our roommate situation because he went to go join the Navy. Now, on top of that, we just had a update fairly recently that the police were actually able to get back to me, and they confirmed that it wasn't my roommate. They contacted his recruiter and confirmed that he's still at basic training. They also looked at footage from the leasing office, and nothing was found of anyone fleeing on foot, so we assumed that he went out back and fled towards the light rail station next to my complex. The only other thing that I really should mention is that they would inform me on anything else. I also apologize for not being 100% on where the boot camp was for the Navy in the previous update. Final and major update. The police have actually identified the person who used my credit card information. They're going to try to see if there's any connection between that person and the person who used my information, person who left the bag behind. So, crazy person who's been living in my house. Please, for the love of God, let's not meet fucking again. I am so fucking hungry.
Everyone Should Have a Large Dog by Science Forbid. I just found this sub and I love it. I have several stories to share, but this one came to mind first because I was just retelling it to my younger brother, who recently got a Doberman puppy. The year was about 1995, and I was about 16 years old. I lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a middle-class suburban community with my mother, 2 younger brothers, and our 140-pound Doberman named Turbo. From the front door of our house, you could see directly into our living room, which was an open concept floor plan with the kitchen and dining room. So basically you could see right into it, kind of one room. And our couch was on the wall directly in front of the front door. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. My brothers and I still spent a decent amount of time playing outside, because back then that's what people did. I suppose anyone paying attention knew who lived in our house, and I also suppose they knew that the only adult was gone when the only car was gone. However, prior to the man showing up at the house, I'd never really noticed anything off, and I never noticed anything afterwards, so maybe we were just a random target or something. It was a Saturday and Mom and the boys had run to the grocery store. In Nevada, it's really hot, and in the 90s, we didn't really have air conditioning, so to cool off, you would have to open all the windows and doors and use fans. But on this particular day, I had the back sliding door open and the front door wide open, so I could get like a cross breeze. and the screen door was unlocked. I was napping on the couch in full view of the front door in shorts and a tank top, with unlocked doors. In my defense, there was 140 pounds of protective dog muscle on the floor next to me, and probably the only reason I'm still alive. Around the approximate time I expected my family to come home from the store, Turbo began barking. Assuming he was barking at their arrival, I told him to shush, and I tried to go back to sleep. Turbo, God bless his sweet protective soul, continued to bark, becoming more and more intense and even aggressive with his barking. Finally, after 10 minutes or so, with Turbo, refusing to be quiet and my family never coming in, I sat up and I realized something was definitely wrong. A man I didn't know stood seemingly frozen, staring at my frenzied and barking Doberman. Assuming that the man had some appropriate business at my home, I hurried the 10 steps to the unlocked screen door, constantly shushing Turbo. I apologized for my dog for not, hearing his knock. He never knocked. The man explained that he was from the phone company, and he was here to check our lines. He never took his eyes off Turbo, though. Turbo never stopped snarling. I leaned forward far enough to see the street. Only unmarked, privately owned cars lined the streets. I looked at the man, who was dressed in tennis shoes, jeans, and a t-shirt. Okay, I was 16 and dumb enough to take a nap in front of an unlocked door, but I'm not a fool. Phone company personnel, A, always wear uniforms, B, always drive company vehicles, C, don't come without being called, and D, don't work on weekends. I looked at the man, who had yet to look up from the 140-pound dog who was now foaming at the mouth. I grasped the screen door handle and held it. This got his attention. He met my eyes and I said, "You have 30 seconds to show me identification, or I open this door." I don't even think he made an incoherent excuse as he ran away. He just kinda ran. I fell to my knees and hugged Turbo. I gave him all the meat in the fridge. I believe with absolute certainty that I would have been attacked if we hadn't had him. I like to think that if I hadn't had a huge, overly protective dog, I would have been in the habit of locking doors. But what would a screen door latch do against an intruder? And that creep stood there and watched me for like 10 minutes? Perhaps he was too scared and paralyzed in fear, but maybe he was just working his angles, and only Turbo's insistent display of willingness to kill anyone who threatened me changed his mind. Well, that's my theory, I guess. Turbo has long passed, but his legacy still lives on. And two loving, loyal, and lethal, when necessary, dogs sleep in my room every night.